we're not going to brand this the Mike and Mike show, but it kind of feels like that. Mike and I oftentimes just chat about what's going on in the industry, and we wanted to basically do a webinar, maybe series. We'll do this as the first one, and if people want to listen to it, and you guys give us a thumbs up, we may continue this. But the whole idea is to just bring forth a lot of the discussions that we're hearing around the industries. There's a ton of trends that are impacting the physical security industry right now. And maybe I'll just kick off by just going into how we even got into the industry. So, the beginning of Genea had nothing to do with physical security. It was our first technology that I bought into about 14 years ago was actually cloud software that plugs into the building automation system of high-rise office buildings and automates tenants accessing HVAC for their suite after it's been turned off, and it handles all the billing. So think about that product. It's like your Nest thermostat for the high-rise office. We grew our client base to now, 21 of the top 25 largest Class A office building owners are clients of that product. And building a really good relationship with that audience, we started hearing about other pain points that they're trying to solve. And, to make a long story short, how we got in physical security is I kept on hearing all the pain points about physical security. Can you please help? And I said, what's going on? Well, let me tell you, every time a tenant in our building has a new employee join, this is what we have to do to get that new employee physical secure access to the parking garage, the exterior of the building on weekend and nights, through the turnstile and the elevator. And we kept on hearing about, the HID card that has to be walked down by somebody in the property management office down to the basement of the building where the software sits on a computer. And I said, did you say the software sits on a computer? Yes. And then we have to walk that card up to the tenant, and somebody in their IT department has to program that at the suite level access control, which is typically software in a computer in the server closet. A lot of manual processes. And so kept on hearing that over and over again. And I remember distinctly in 2017, started doing a bunch of research. And in my opinion, access control software is the largest enterprise software application that is going to for sure go to the cloud, just like every enterprise application is already there, including the Zoom call. But right now it's still mostly on-prem. So it took us a couple of years, but how Mike and I became partners is Mike and Mashit Patel co-founded a access control platform that we'll talk about a little bit more, and we merged our businesses together at the end of 2019, and so that's now part of Genea Security. So for those of you who haven't heard of us until recently, we really haven't been branded Genea Security until basically a handful of years ago. So Mike, maybe just share with us your journey on getting into physical security.
Yeah, yeah, it's a fun story. Uh and I'll try to keep it brief. We were a couple kids in college, and I went home for Christmas my junior year of college. And where I grew up, there's like a gate that has a call box on it, and it was one pin code from the time I was born until 20 years old. And when I came home that year for Christmas, someone had carved the pin code into the box. And so decided that there had to be a better way than just giving out the same pin code to every guest forever. And so I went back, and with my two co-founders, we created an app that would integrate to any call box and give out custom pin codes to every guest you invited. So that's really kind of how we got into the physical security world at all. We didn't even know it was the physical security industry. We just thought it was a multifamily visitor management system at that time. Um, and similar to the Genea story, right? You stay close to the customer, listen to their feedback, and the consistent drumbeat of feedback we kept getting was love the cloud-based visitor management system. Um, but can you also manage the key cards for our apartment buildings or our residential communities? And so we started saying, sure, like let's take a look. And what we found was that customers were, you know, they would take us into like a dusty broom closet in the apartment building property management office and blow off the dust on the Windows laptop that was running their access control system. And we're like, okay, we can do something about that. And so we at the same time, got introduced to some of the folks over at HID who were um, they had this HID Vertex controller that we could integrate with that would do the door access. And in those conversations, they also were like, hey, there's this reader that we just launched that can talk to a mobile phone for instead of a physical key card or in addition to a physical key card. And we're like, yes, like that's definitely what we want to bring into the system. So we kind of did two things at the same time. We launched the cloud-based access control component of the system, and then we integrated the mobile keys and started in multifamily, and then very quickly, enterprise customers started reaching out to us saying, "Hey, I want to get rid of key cards for our employees." And that's how we started getting into the corporate office world and commercial office buildings. And the rest is history now, serving customers in over 50 countries around the world.
Yeah, so I think that's where you and I always kind of get very aligned is everything, our companies do prior to the merger and ever since. We're just looking to lean in with our end users to understand pain points, and we're solving it with technology. And so as you think about, the biggest struggles right now, corporate security teams are dealing uh, with their physical security technologies, tech stack. What are the biggest items? And the other part of it is
Yeah.
why is it taking so long? Like I've, about how long it's been and everyone's
Yeah.
a slow moving industry. Why is that in your opinion?
Yeah, so I mean, to the point about slow moving, I think a lot of the pain points that we uncovered in 2014, 2015, when we were launching the first version of the access control system, are very much the same as they are today. So it's how do I manage hundreds or thousands of people with limited staff? Um, we have new hires coming in, we have people leaving the company, and everything is being done manually to add people into the system, give them the proper access rights, and give them credentials to access the facilities. Still even today in 2025, very, very manual process for a lot of organizations. And so that's the biggest time suck, really, is just the day-to-day management of the basics. And so what we really help customers do in that regard is automate a lot of those workflows. We have integrations to Enter ID or Okta for user provisioning automation. So you have a new hire that gets added into the HR system, and then they get synced to the identity management system. And that will provision all their other applications like their email, their CRM access, all that stuff. And we're just an extension of that identity management sort of provisioning automation for physical access. So it creates the profile in Genea, assigns their access rights, and then if you're using a digital credential, it'll even send them a mobile credential at the same time. So that pain point, it gets more acute as the organization gets larger. And so that's the main pain point that we help solve for. The other one is uh, just the amount of repeat tasks that come from physical credential management. So if you're talking about a company with, let's say, 5,000 employees, a couple dozen offices, people lose cards, right? That just happens. And it could be or it could be an apartment building. Right? You have thousands of people that live in an apartment building, they lose their cards, or thousands of people that work at a
Or
hospital.
never forbid a student in a university loses their card. Like that
Yeah,
never happens, right? Yeah.
sure. Yeah, it never happens. So it's like the same problem in all these different like vertical contexts. And so the digital credential helps a lot with that. One is if you lose your phone, it's like a five-alarm fire. You walk out the door, you're immediately running back in to get the phone. So people don't really lose their phone that often. So it helps cut down on all the rebadging for people. And then if you're a limited, physical security team, you maybe have like 5 to 10 people centrally located at HQ, but you've got offices around the world. Getting someone a new card, either you have to have a local badging service at those locations, or you're shipping them a badge. So with a digital credential, it's just like, putting a boarding pass on your phone. You get a text or an email, and you can just download the new key without having to be physically present or get something shipped to you. So it cuts
Yeah,
down on
that
so
reminds
much of
me.
that work.
Without naming names, I remember the CEO of a company who mentioned him flying to his London office and having to wait outside for them to open the door so that he could be let in because he didn't have a physical credential, right? And
Yeah.
that's always blows my mind that large corporate security teams haven't been able to leverage technology to figure that out, right? One card gets me into all my offices. The technology's there, but hasn't been universally adopted yet. And so, the second part of that question is why so long, right? I mean, you pretty much look at the rest of the tech
Yeah.
stack, everything's already migrated to the cloud. I have my opinion, which I'll, share with you in a second, but like, why do you think it's taken this long?
Look, there's a sort of cocktail of reasons, I would say, but the main ingredients, in my opinion, are you have proprietary hardware in some cases that really limits customers' flexibility to upgrade. And so that's why, from day one, we've been big believers in non-proprietary hardware, right? So all the controllers are Mercury based. And if we come across a customer who is using a Mercury-based system, we can take over all the existing controllers and readers without a hardware replacement. So it sort of eliminates that barrier to adoption. Then you have the other stuff that's a little softer, which is more like the sort of institutional momentum, as you might say. So people sometimes are like fearful of that change process. And I think that's where very early on in our company's story, we identified that problem, and built a whole team to help with those migrations. So whether it's going into the existing system, pulling out all the user database and the access rights, and then configuring the new system in Genea, we really help smooth out that transition process. And a lot of times what we're doing in the sales conversation is talking them through that process, the playbook that we run to do these migrations, and that those two are seem to be the biggest barriers, in my opinion.
So we'll talk about the service and support model that's pervasive in the industry in a second here. My opinion on why it's taken so long, there are also kind of two major factors. One is when you're thinking about any operations, whether it's a university, a hospital, or any corporate environment, physical security is the absolute foundation of operations, right? You got to make sure that you know how to secure a building or a location. And so to change physical security, it's basically the equivalent of lifting up your entire house to redo the foundation and then putting the house back and hopefully nothing else breaks. So it's just a very daunting thing. I think that is one thing. So, people, a lot of end users we talk to, complain about the physical security solution like endlessly, but they just don't know how to do it without that massive disruption. So what you just described about is, it doesn't require lifting the house. We could actually redo the foundation and not really disturb the house. And so, that's something that I think is worth pointing out. The other part of it is just the personas. I think, as we think about, historically, the purchasing decision of physical security solutions is typically ahead of corporate security, VP, director, and their backgrounds tend to be more law enforcement, more military. And then what they're typically, the motions seem to have been, we need to open a London office, we need to open a New York office, call my, local integrator partner, and they're going to sell us whatever's off their truck, right? And so I think as we have seen IT become much more involved with the decision making, in fact, many times the key decision maker in physical security personnel are just influencers in the decision, understanding what the requirements are, but IT needs to own it because ultimately they're maintaining it. we're seeing a need to get to the cloud. So I think those two factors, I think, have been the biggest drivers of it. And that brings me to kind of a next question for you, which is, as we first went to our first IEC West a handful of years ago, I remember distinctly the theme was cloud versus on-prem, and there was a very big question mark. Like, is cloud really the answer, or should we be continuing to leverage into our on-prem? And it seems like over the last couple of IEC Wests, when you're walking down the hall at the convention center and everyone has all their branding, it's cloud this, it's AI this, all the marketing material is all cloud AI, cloud AI. And so there seems to be a lot of confusion about like who really has a cloud application that makes sense. So help us understand like what's the difference between different cloud solutions that we've come across.
Yeah, I would say like like any marketing buzzword that we come across in our lives, uh, there's sort of like scope creep that comes into play. And so as the sort of customer demand has shifted past the discussion of on-prem versus cloud into like, it's basically cloud only in most cases nowadays for what people are considering. Um, the companies that haven't really like re-architected their products into this sort of full cloud environment use the cloud nomenclature to kind of obfuscate the what's under the hood. And so if you look at our product, it's natively built in the cloud. Everything is built on a microservices architecture in AWS, which has tons of advantages for scalability, reliability, security. Um, Whereas some other, companies use the cloud name, but what it really is they took the same product and then just copied and pasted the code base into a cloud server. So yes, it's accessible in the cloud, but you don't get the benefits of auto scaling infrastructure. You don't get the benefits of the redundancy of a microservices architecture. And what that means is, if you take a look at like our dashboard, there's 50 different buttons and the menus and all the things that you're doing. Everything that underlies one of those menu items and even sub-menu items is its own dedicated server. So it's much more robust when you scale it up to an organization that has, let's say, hundreds or thousands of controllers and doors, because everything has its own dedicated compute infrastructure behind it, whether you're pulling a report, giving someone a new badge, setting up an integration with a directory service or a video management system. Each of those is running on dedicated server infrastructure. In a monolithic code base, everything has to be running on the same server infrastructure for applications and databases. So if one piece fails, the whole thing fails. Whereas with ours, if one piece fails, only that piece fails, and the rest of the 85 servers are continuing to run.
And I can't tell you how important that is, right? The more we understand what a lot of the other OEMs in the space are dealing with is it's like when you're building a brand new product with the modern tools that AWS and Azure, when they've launched as cloud platforms, they also, in order to encourage best-in-class SaaS applications to be developed, they created a bunch of tool sets that we were able to leverage and design the Microsoft services architecture that you just mentioned, which helps with innovation, helps with scalability versus most of the OEMs, what they're basically doing is forklifting their old code base, monolithic code base, to a hosted instance of AWS or Azure, but it's the same code, right? It has all the same
Yeah,
limitations. In order to innovate, you have to test against everything. Otherwise, something could break the entire system, right? Versus
yeah,
microservices, I think right now, are we at 85 different microservices right now? So with
roughly.
that rough number, anytime we're innovating anything, it's adding another component, but it's not changing all the other components. So it helps with the pace of innovation. just give me a sense for that. Like, what does that mean from an innovation cycle? Like, what's the different architecture? What does it allow in terms of innovation?
Yeah, so I think I can demonstrate that in real time. So if you look at our dashboard here, there's, when I'm talking about all the different menu components, one of the things that we're launching is this AI engine for reporting. So instead of having to go into our reports module and build a custom report, even though it's pretty easy in our system, obviously the future that we want to enable for customers is using a natural language style interface. So in a microservices environment, we built this in a dedicated application Docker basically container service and then run it on its own dedicated Amazon EC2 server. So we didn't have to build, test, and deploy it, factoring in all the other 85 services that we're running in the product. We build it in its own silo and then just connect it into the dashboard through our like internal APIs. So when we can just build something on its own and then deploy it and not have to worry about breaking something else in the system and creating this like butterfly effect of failure, we can just deploy it. And if there's an issue, we can fix it right there inside of its own application service rather than having to worry about, oh, we deployed this and it broke the adding a card feature or the activity logs aren't working.
Well, maybe dive into a little bit of that. We've had conversations with, a number of the different Mag 7, and when you're hearing about the scale of those organizations and leveraging old, you know, uh, technology, what are some of the like pain points you're seeing them dealing with in terms of just
Yeah.
latency, maintenance of servers? Help us understand that.
Yeah, I mean for large systems, especially in the older architecture products, the one of the biggest problems they run into is the scaling of the connectivity services for their hardware devices. Some people call them comm servers. So when you're a large organization running, let's say, thousands of Mercury controllers, and then you're opening a new facility that's going to have 300 new controllers at that facility, most cases you have to spin up a new comm server because if you try to force 300 more controllers and all the network traffic that comes with it into the same existing compute infrastructure, you start to see where someone badges in and then it doesn't show up in the software for 10 seconds, 15 seconds, even minutes in some cases, right? If those controllers are located in APAC, right, in like say Singapore or Australia, it could take a minute or more to actually see someone badge in. Um, so if especially if you're running a GSOC, you can't have that kind of lag in the system. You need to be able to see and correlate alarm events to video or other services in near real time so that you can quickly see when things are happening and triage emergencies. So that is all a symptom of forcing too much network traffic into limited compute infrastructure. Whereas in a microservices architecture, um, as soon as the CPU in our service gets above 40% consumption, we just spin up another uh, uh, comm server equivalent and then reroute a segment of the network traffic to the new comm server. That happens automatically in the system, so we don't have to worry about it. We can add in thousands of controllers a month to our service and not have to worry about it dragging down the performance of the platform.
And that's the scalability part that we were talking about. I think that's
Right.
really important, and it's impacting a lot of different corporate security teams. That latency, which just is not something that anyone can tolerate. So, and by the way, for all the participants on this, once again, appreciate you joining this call. We are open for questions, so please go ahead and include that in the chat, and we'll weave those questions in either through our discussion or at the end. So We've talked briefly about, just the confusion of cloud, like what cloud means. I think to summarize it, natively built in the cloud really does make a difference. So make sure you ask those questions. But another thing that we're seeing a lot in the industry, once again, marketing, is open. What does open mean? Right. And so a lot of companies, even ones that we know for a fact are not open, they'll claim to be open and they'll talk about their open APIs, right? But in your eyes, how do you define open?
Sure. So, I mean, at its root, open means for the customer um, control and interoperability. So, to try not to not use buzzwords here, like I try to bifurcate them into like the infrastructure layer at the protocols and then the application layer for integrations. So at the infrastructure layer, you have what are like open protocols, things like OSDP. So OSDP is an open protocol standard built by SIA that allows for a reader to talk to a controller over a secure communication line. And then it comes with some other configuration capabilities for the hardware. Um, if you're using an OSDP enabled reader, any reader that you buy that's OSDP enabled can connect to any access control controller that supports OSDP. So whether it's Mercury, Azure, or others, right? That's an open standard. So like you're not locked into the hardware vendors having the reader and the controller from the same manufacturer. If you want an HID reader to talk to a Mercury controller or an HID Vertex controller or an Arrow controller, Azure, right? It's an open protocol standard. So the customer has the choice to take their readers and credentials and move them to a different controller if they want. Um, the next layer is at the application layer. So at the application layer, if you're open, you allow for basically a standard API structure, typically like built on JSON, that allows for applications to talk to each other in a standard communication protocol. So if you take a practical example, like provisioning from an identity management system to an access control system that uses a protocol called SCIM, which is an open protocol that allows for us to receive a user's name, email address, and other demographic or firmographic information, and then provision a profile in the system. And that SCIM standard applies to Okta, Entra ID, OneLogin, Google Workspace, etc. SailPoint, another example. So you can choose any identity management provider and connect it to your access control system as long as it supports SCIM, and in which case we do. And so if you're using a proprietary protocol, it really limits your choice and ability to integrate systems. So that is really core to our DNA, right? We have dozens of integrations out of the box for customers for identity management, which is the SAML protocol, or provisioning, which is SCIM protocol, or connecting an intercom device, to Genea. Is a great example, right? You have SIP protocol, whereas if you have a proprietary access control system with a proprietary intercom, you can only use that access control system with that intercom. Whereas with Genea, you can take any SIP-enabled intercom, whether it's Axis, 2N, A-Phone, Zenatel, and connect it to Genea. Whereas with some of our proprietary competitors, you have to buy their intercom for it to work.
So you kind of go through the plumbing a little bit, the architectural components that make something open versus maybe not. How do you see the industry? I look at the industry and it's wrought full of businesses that from a board level, they want to keep their customers obviously as customers for a very long time. And I look at it as they've tricked somewhere. They've been able to trick their customers into buying their solution. And even if they provide horrible service or value, they can't get away from that without a costly replacement. So where do you see some of these gotchas? Like how do other companies keep customers locked in? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, there's some pretty shady business practices out there, and without naming names, I think one of the most insidious ones is where people say that we have an open camera, for example, that because they have like a third party API that you can use to talk to the camera, but if you don't pay the subscription service, the camera locks down and you can't access the RTS stream or the WebRTC stream that comes from that camera because it bricks itself without the license key being refreshed. So they'll use the open sort of branding or buzzword, but then the detail is where the devil is. And as soon as you don't pay the subscription, the camera's a brick. That is all too common in proprietary systems, and they try to use some of the buzzwords to kind of smooth over the conversation with the customer and sort of make them feel like they're buying an open piece of hardware, but in reality, it's not.
How about at the controller level?
Yeah, so I mean, at the controller level, especially in access control, it's a little trickier with a camera, right? So you have kind of like proprietary access control hardware, which is people kind of know what that is, and then you have the Mercury sort of ecosystem, and Mercury is about as open as it gets for access control in the sense that you have about 30 different access control software providers that work on the Mercury protocol standard. It's not a fully open system where they have like a published SDK that you can go download on the internet and build to. You have to be sort of allowed into the walled garden, but at least you have choice. So you have 30 choices, whereas if you buy like a Secure panel or an AMAG panel, it only works with AMAG or Secure software. That's the biggest difference. So in terms of creating an open standard in access control, Mercury has done the best job of creating an ecosystem of software providers like us that can take over their hardware.
Yeah, and I remember running a campaign at ISC West with signs maybe that were depicting "Don't be a hardware hostage." That is a DNA that we believe very hard much in, and it's surprising how many companies, even some of the newer companies, still adopt a hardware hostage mindset. Is they want to lock you in with their controllers, their cameras, and make it very difficult and expensive to get away from that service provider because there's no other software that works on that hardware and it requires a full rip and replace. So we talk about that as being a hardware hostage, but there's also platform hostages. How do you help us understand how you could be held hostage to a platform at the application layer?
Yeah, I mean, there's at the application layer, you can have like a platform ecosystem where it's access control, video, visitor management, intercom services, alarm services, but it's all from the same software provider and the same proprietary hardware provider. They're vertically integrated at that layer. So yes, they have like the full spectrum of services in their platform, but it's all proprietary hardware and software that's locked together. The difference on Genea, of course, is that we provide that same ecosystem of interoperable services, access control, visitor management, video integration, intercoms, alarm integration, but it's all through API integrations. So we have 15 going on 17, video management systems that we can integrate with. Any SIP intercom can be enabled, on Genea. Any Wiegand or OSDP powered reader can be used on Genea. Um, you can use Bosch IP alarms. So it's not a Genea alarm panel, it's a Bosch alarm panel that's connected via an API to Genea, right? That's the difference between like a platform hostage and what we provide, which is like an open ecosystem of physical security systems.
Yeah, there are platforms out there that will sell you a Mercury controller, but in terms of being able to integrate, other applications into that ecosystem, they'll close off that ecosystem and say you can only buy applications that we sell you. So,
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah,
platform hostage approach,
right.
and it's effective for that company's business model. We don't think it's the right thing for the end user, and so platform hostages are real. Hardware hostages are real. The way I frame it for end users is, if you go to a provider, ask one simple question: are there other software applications that can use that controller? And if they can't say yes to that, then they're no matter what they say, it's a hardware hostage situation. And same thing on the platform side.
Yeah,
Um,
that's the API level, right? So, is there an open API that's available on the internet without a password login, right? Like,
correct. Exactly.
do you control who can integrate to my system or how I can use the API? That's the other sort of insidious part of the open nomenclature that gets misused or abused, really misused is
They want
maybe
to fuzz it
too
up, right?
nice.
Yeah, no, no, we're
Yeah.
open, but you have to, pay us a bunch of money, or the other tech partner has to pay us a bunch of money in order to have their application integrate into their core application, which obviously, that is not true open. I always love it when we say just on Google, just type in Genea API and you'll see all our API endpoints and
Mhm.
you can map out any integration you want on your own if we haven't already gotten to it. So look, let's shift gears a little bit. Outside of cloud, there's these two letters that are taking over the entire world, A and I. And I think, along with cloud pixie dust that a lot of companies are sprinkling on their in their marketing materials, AI is also popping up. So what are you seeing is the future of how AI is going to impact our industry?
Yeah, I think, well, so AI has been extensively used in physical security for a long time. I think the video AI products have really been on the forefront of leveraging AI in security for quite a long time. Um, I think the problem with AI is that it's one of those marketing buzzword terms that encompasses a lot of nuance with it. You have machine learning, you have inference, you have other sort of disciplines within this AI bucket. Now, in video, this is like computer vision that creates metadata that's used for lots of different applications. So it detect a person from a car, from an animal? Can it detect the color, like the colors of the shirts or the cars? Um, all of that is a computer vision model that reads the pixels and then creates the metadata. And then you can do things like natural language search, like show me the black SUV that drove through the parking gate. But that's an AI enabled service on two layers, computer vision and then natural language processing with usually an LLM model. Um, so it's extensively used in video security. Now in access control, we're coming into the sort of new AI paradigm. And I think our approach is going to be, I think, very valuable to customers because, I mean, maybe we're full of ourselves, but we like to look at things from a first principles perspective and ask, like, what is the real problem that we're solving with this like application or technology? And there's two real big ones in the access control side of things that we're tackling. So one is the ability to build analytics and reports in real time. And so I kind of showed it briefly, but I'll bring it back up. So we're this is in beta. So if you're an existing customer and you don't have access to this yet, give us a few weeks. It'll be available. But this is an AI powered report builder. So if I want to say, let's say I'm doing an investigation of a person, show me the last 10 access granted events for Austin Linder. So what it's doing is reading this natural language question and then building a SQL query to answer that question in code. And then we run the code on our database and build the report. So this is right here. I can see now Austin's badge history and then export that in a CSV file. Or I can build like an average attendance analytic report, and then it'll give me a CSV and a graph answer. So this is a very practical application of natural language processing in physical security, building reports and analytics where you would have to do this in Excel or an SIEM tool like Datadog or Splunk very manually. Now you can do it through natural language, and anyone can do it. You don't have to be an expert in Excel or in data science and visualization
And to
to
be
do
clear,
this.
what's going on with my data? Because with AI, there's a lot of concerns about AI, getting out of our ecosystem and being used, and a lot of regulations don't allow
Yeah.
data to be, obviously outside of a certain scope. How do we understand the data side of this?
Yeah, so all that's happening here again is that the data inside of Genea is never leaving the Genea like platform. What we're doing is we're taking your question, feeding it to an LLM, and saying, "Hey, Gemini, if you're going to answer this question in a SQL query, how would you do it?" And then it gives us back that SQL query, and then we run that query internally and serve the answer. So the data is never leaving. We're not sending the entire database to Gemini and saying, "Hey, build, here, look through the database and build the answer." We just say, "Give us a SQL query and give it back." And then we run that internally. So when you're thinking about like data residency, GDPR, CCPA, all of that is still covered now in this application. So data is never leaving Genea. Now, back to your original question of things that we're doing with AI and how it's going to affect, physical security. The other thing that is really impactful for customers is you only have so many eyeballs and people to monitor your alarms and events, right? And oftentimes we're doing too much with too little. And this is where AI can give us a huge unlock in physical security. So one of the things that we're going to be launching next year is an AI agent that is watching sort of the events and the alarms that are coming through the system, and then picking out which ones look like, you know, something that is actually something that person needs to look at versus something that doesn't need to be looked at. A good example would be if you have a door forced alarm, or let's say a access denied event. Someone badgers down to a door they don't have access to one time. Typically, that's not something that's urgent that needs to be looked at by a person if it's just one time. But if it's someone badging in four times with access denied, and then you get a door forced alarm right after, that's an urgent alarm that needs to be looked at immediately by a person. And so we're working on building this agent that will basically serve as a GSOC operator for you, and then pick and choose like which ones need to be looked at urgently and which ones are lower categorized alarms that can be looked at later. So it allows you, it creates this force multiplier effect where the same people can do much more and actually complete the sort of full set of services they need to provide with the same amount of resources.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in that AI isn't going to eliminate jobs. It's just going to make everybody, 3, 4, 5, 10x more productive, right? Just by
Sure.
making tool sets, that allow them to be, that much more impactful in their day to day. I love where we're going with AI right now. I do think that AI is, the biggest technology revolution that we're going to ever see in our lifetime. And we've seen a lot already. So it'll be interesting to see how quickly we can incorporate the tool sets into physical security where, there's a shot, Mike, of taking an industry that has been maybe a decade or two behind technology and really get it back on par. And I think AI is one engine to help us maybe get there.
Yeah.
Talking about things that didn't make sense for you and I when we first got in this industry, we have many conversations over, cocktails about like, how did this ever happen? Is the support model. Like,
Mhm.
remember like, when we first got into this industry, walk me through the conversations we used to have on how does this make sense on support in the industry?
So, yeah, I think it goes back to the sort of very early innings. of launching the first version of the access control system, our first investor was an Avigilon dealer, and he kind of talked us through and showed us if you wanted to get simple questions answered, like how do I set up a door unlock schedule or create a new card format in the system, give someone a mobile key, you had to have an extra support contract that was on top of your core licensing. So you had to pay for support. And then you also had to get the people who were talking or requesting support certified to even engage with support. So you'd call in and they'd be like, what's your contract number? And okay, let me look it up in the system. Okay, now you're allowed to talk. And then they would check if you're certified, right? So it was just all these barriers to doing what is a core, like fundamental, part of providing a product is supporting that product. So we immediately said that's nonsense, right? And we just built a live chat system right into the product from day one. So any customer who had any questions or needed assistance can just live chat with us. And again, showing is better than telling. So when you're inside of the Genea system, this little live chat button right here brings you into our support chat, and you can search through articles, or you can just open up a new chat with our team. So instead of having to call in, give your contract number, go through an annual certification to be able to access support, all you have to do is say, "Hey, I'm a customer and I need help." And then it gives you a hotline that you can call 24/7. So if it's urgent, like just pick up the phone and call us. But if it's a basic question, you can just chat with it. So how do I create a temporary door unlock schedule? This is a revolutionary concept in the physical security world. Even today, a decade later, there's only, I think, two or three other companies now that even offer this. And for the longest time, like 9 years, we are the only one that had this. And it just started with that sort of first principles question of like, why does it have to be that way? Like, why can't I just provide direct support? And we got a lot of pushback initially when we launched this, and we would start talking to integrators about selling Genea and why it was so much better. And they're like, I don't like that support thing. I want to own the customer relationship. And what they quickly found out was that all of the annoying or like unnecessary questions that they were spending so much time answering for customers about basic system functionality was stuff that we could handle for them. So they would have to, in some cases, roll trucks to customers to change a schedule or add a card format, do really basic stuff. Now, Genea can save them a customer truck roll, because they would roll the truck. They send a technician out for 3 hours to do this really basic thing, and then they have to charge the customer a couple $100 for that time. And the customer would dispute the invoice every time. Like, why are you charging me $300 to put a schedule on a door? That's nonsense. And so they would just not get paid for that time. But they still spent the time and wasted the technician's time going out there. So this really reduced the amount of like invoice disputes and the amount of time they were wasting on basic support questions. And the customers get a much better experience.
Yeah, and that brings into light, it's something that's also, in my opinion, evolving, and that's the role of the integrator, right? And I talked to one of our large partners, a large security integrator, and their mandate from the C-suite was increasing the margins of the business. Revenues for the business were growing nicely, but the margins were not growing nearly as fast. And the executive team basically had a mandate, instead of always sending somebody on a truck to solve all our problems, we need to get to remote services and eventually managed services. And I love that concept, right? Because I do think
Yeah.
fundamentally this industry is following the same path that the IT industry went through in the early 2000s when you had a lot of IT services companies, their business model was primarily selling labor and equipment, right? And the labor to install the equipment. And those all changed when broadband internet became widely available. And when that happened, all these IT services companies, the one that migrated to a more managed services approach, where they could do all the monitoring and all the support remotely, cheaper and better and more proactively. That's when you saw a lot of companies basically say, look, the corporate IT function is something that I want to outsource to a trusted third party because it's not a core competency of my business. I want a provider that could basically do it much better than I can in-house. So I do think fundamentally that the role of the security integrator, the ones that get it are going to gobble up significant market share from the ones that are continuing to sell you, an on-prem system and selling you things through labor and equipment. So
Absolutely.
it's been interesting to talk to the security integrators that understand that dynamic and are leaning in with us because, in many respects, we are the enabling factor, right? There's really, for the enterprise level, no other platform that we've come across that it helps really enable remote services and managed services for our security integrator partners.
Yeah.
So I want to double click for 1 second on the AI concept. So we talked about AI as it relates to reporting, natural language reporting, which is I think it's super cool. And it's taken reporting from what used to be very painful and it used to take end users a long time to get a basic, simple attendance report to now something that can happen very, very quickly. But what are the and obviously we just showed our help chatbot where a lot of that's run through AI, right? So when you queried our help articles, that's really the Fin AI bot that's basically making that happen, but we have a live agent to support it. So those are ways that we've incorporated AI. But the next layer of AI is it automating workflows? Like, how do you see that happening?
Yeah, so the first frontier is the reporting engine. The next two frontiers that we're really crossing with AI sort of enabled services are the GSOC agent, basically, that's going to watch and highlight things that need immediate attention versus things that are lower priority, or create alarms where they didn't exist before. So that's the like four badges and then door forced open, create alarm use case. Um, the other one is automating more of the like operations in the system. So the acronym is CRUD here. So create, request, update, and delete. So things like here's a list of event guests that we have coming up for an event next Wednesday. Add them to the visitor management system and send them invites. So at some point, in the first half of next year, you'll be able to take CSV files, and instead of manually uploading the CSV file and mapping everything and then sending the invites, you just give it to the AI agent and it will auto create all the guest invitations for you. Or, hey, we just bought a company. Here is their access control database. I need you to add all of these people into the system. Here's a CSV file, and it will add the users, assign the access rights, upload the credentials for you, rather than what is being done semi-manual today with, uploading a CSV file, mapping all the columns, assigning the access rights, et cetera. So that AI agent natural language interface that we saw in the reporting engine is going to have some serious evolution when it starts to perform actions in the system with human natural language prompting. Um, Really, it's about that democratization of the system. So whereas in for the last 20 plus years of the security industry, both security integrators and customers sometimes would have to go get training paid for and sit through hours of videos or lectures on how to use their system. The natural language interface allows anybody to get dropped into the system and do really advanced things with almost no training at all, right? That is really like the future that we see, um, uh,
I,
and
I
are pursuing.
could not agree more, right? The days of everything being gate kept by, one or two people in an entire organization who got certified on some OEM, platform, and because they needed to get certified in order to use it, and the user interface was so arcane that no one else could want to even touch it. Those days have to go away, right? It needs to be more accessible. So I couldn't agree more. So we have a handful of minutes left. We have a couple questions I want to make sure we quickly address.
Yeah.
One is surrounding credentials. So, with a lot of our end users, they are evaluating what's the right form of credentials for their business, and what are you seeing as trends in the credential side of things?
Yeah. I
Maybe we
think,
could take away this screen share because
oh yeah.
thanks.
Um, so the question specifically is around like the adoption of biometrics and but I think you put it in the right framing, which is like talk about the whole spectrum of credentialing. So customers, especially large, complex customers, the answer is rarely just one type of credential, right? It's never just physical cards. It's never just mobile keys. It's never just biometrics. It's some mix of them all. Like we have one Fortune 50 company that uses Genea, and they are managing everything from data centers to corporate offices to distribution centers and then retail locations. And the answer for credentialing across them is different in every use case. At the corporate office, they use digital credentials. At the distribution centers, they use physical cards. At the retail stores, they use a hybrid of physical and digital. And then at the data centers, it's all biometric. So, and that is, the use case dictates the credentialing medium for a lot of reasons, right? One is the practical reality. Like we have um, there's a scientific lab corporation in Australia that uses Genea, and they use all biometric because these people are walking around in gloves and in full, like, suits, like hazmat suits. And they can't be carrying a phone. They can't be carrying a card. They can't use a fingerprint biometric. They have to use a facial recognition reader because of just the fact that people are in hazmat suits walking around. But if you're going to the office for the day, not wearing a hazmat suit, you can use a fingerprint biometric, or you can use a mobile credential or a physical card. So the physical environment dictates that. There's also like social realities here. So like in some countries, the use of biometrics in everyday life is pervasive. Um, in China or in other countries, they use a lot of facial recognition, biometrics for everyday use cases like going to the grocery store, making payments. Whereas in European or Western countries, that's not very well adopted at this point, and they're much more conditioned to using like an Apple Wallet or a Google Wallet for your credit card or for your membership card to that store or location. So like we have a large gym franchise that's using, digital credentials for access to the gyms in North America because that's just what, people in the United States are kind of conditioned to use and is pervasive in other areas of their life, not just access. So yeah, I think that's why you see sort of different mixes, and I love that about our system that we can take on all of them.
Yeah, it feels like mobile is the fastest form of kind of an alternative credential to a card for right now in the US. But I do see that biometrics over time is going to be more widely accepted. TSA now uses it as they're checking you in at the airport, and I think as people just get more familiar with it, they're going to be less concerned about the privacy data, right? Issues that are oftentimes gatekeepers.
Yeah.
Uh, Last question. If you were to sum it up in 1 minute, what's the difference between us and Phoenix?
Okay. Where do I start? So uh, the integration suites are hugely different, right? Tons of respect for the Phoenix and Acre team, but frankly, we have dozens of more integrations with identity management systems and video management systems and other application services that they don't have. And we're that gap is growing every quarter, right? We're just outpacing them in innovation as it comes to integrations.
And by the way, our
What
integrations are free.
Yes, Our integrations are free, available out of the box, so you don't have to pay for them. There's no additional licensing for most of them. So that's a huge differentiator. Another one would be like the feature sets within the platform, depending on your use case and your needs. Again, we're outpacing them from system depth and feature set completeness across many different use cases. So integrations, depth of like the enterprise capabilities of the platform are vastly different. Then you have the support model, right? We have the direct live chat support out of the box that they don't offer. So I would say if I had to give you like three main ones, that would be it. We tried to keep it friendly here on the Mike and Mike show, but when the question's asked, we'll answer. So hope
Well, we're at
James,
the
hope that
top of the
answered your
hour, Mike.
question.
Yeah, appreciate everybody attending. For those of you who registered and weren't able to attend, we'll make sure that you get a copy of this. But love all the feedback. Thank you very much, and we'll see you soon. Take care.
Thanks.